Hey guys, welcome to TechWise TV. I'm Rob Boyd.
And I'm Jimmy Ray Purser.
And we're here to talk about
security or something, right?
security in the data center, isn't it?
That's right, that's right. Episode 120.
Thank gosh, because that's what I put on a list.
Man, look at you, dialed in.
It's a new me. It's a new fiscal year. It's time to turn over a new leaf.
Man, you must have had an eval or one coming up.
I'd rather not get into that.
Okay.
But I'm still here, and that's the good thing.
That is the good news, man.
Who says you can't dig out of a little probation? All right. So a couple of things coming up here on security in the data center. The big story, first and foremost, right off the bat, we're going to talk about ASA 9.0. So tease, without giving it away, because I know you've been working on this show.
Right, right.
What's going to surprise us here? What do we need to be thinking about?
You know what? Imagine if you had the ability to take a firewall and increase the throughput of it just linearly, right? If I had the ability to actually grow this network out, be able to keep up with everything, add capacity to it, and make it nonstop. Make it where I have amazing, amazing redundancy in this network. That'd be something, wouldn't it?
I'm having trouble breaking my focus off how you pronounce linearly.
Yeah.
But I can't pronounce it either, so I'm
No,
going to
that's the benefit of a Southern education, my brother.
That is, okay. So we're talking about unprecedented scale.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell us how we get there? We've got to wait for that one?
You gotta wait for it, man, because you know what? It'll really
Okay.
surprise you because it did me, that's for sure.
Okay, so Per Hagen, he's been on the show before. He's
Yep.
going to be back, one of our firewall experts. He'll be here as well. Couple of shows that maybe we recommend people go do for a little pre-research.
Oh, some of the
Actually, if you're
findings.
watching this already, then maybe you're going to go back out of order, but there's still good stuff. So fundamentals of...
High-end firewalls is a great one.
Excellent. And next, we're going to talk about IPS in the data center. We've got a fundamentals
We
around...
got a fundies on IPS, which is really pretty good because it talks about the history of it and where it came from and you know that kind of
And
stuff.
solid history is one of the big story points here, I think, as well, is because this is something that's been building on for a while, but this always sounds like an oxymoron to me.
IPS in the data center, are you kidding me? Yeah, who has the gall to do that?
So this is around the new 4500. Is it the 4520?
Yeah, right.
I believe as well. So more on that. Anil's our guest. He's going to be in here to talk about that detail. New form factors. Jeff's going to be here to talk about the fact, not just with ASA and with IPS, but we're talking about how security really has turned a corner here with regards to security matching up with the deployment situation that makes the most sense for your network.
Right.
So it's really part and parcel network and security tied together.
Yeah.
We're going to get in details around that. He's got some wonderful insight.
Right.
And cloud web security. This is new naming.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
kind of interested to hear about this because I don't know anything. I'll be honest, I don't know a darn thing about it.
So I don't know all the details yet, but the idea is, before we end up, this sounds very interesting to me. This is actually some stuff from, well, I don't know how much we're allowed to say here, but the names have changed, but just so we understand the history, this is about web security from the Ironport days and from the ScanSafe days. We're talking about new connectors, both with ASA.
Are there some changes or just some marketing people have been having too many meetings and they need to change the name?
Well, the names definitely changed because everybody's got to stay, but no, there's technology behind this or it wouldn't be on the show. You know that.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Okay,
That's
okay,
true.
that's going to be
I'm just
there.
trying to be a pawn.
And business class email, no more flying coach.
Wow, groovy.
So more on that. And that has
Hey,
to do with
that's kinda
encryption
cool.
and some other things as I understand it.
Very
Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds like a great episode to me, man. Let's light the candle on this booger.
Security in the data center. That is the focus for today. And first up, to kick us all off and get the big picture story, our correspondent Jay Shree Subramania is here with Scott Gainey to take care of all of it for us. So stay for that.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Scott, let's look at the security trends that you're seeing today. What are some of the implications that Cisco is facing?
Yeah, so there's really two big trends that we're seeing today. The first is cloud. No doubt cloud is a major trend
heard of it.
in the market, right? There's really two aspects of cloud that we're looking at right now. First is the cloud that everyone knows, and that's the shift that enterprises are making from public and private cloud
clouds,
within their data center. The second one is security through the cloud. So we're also seeing some emerging trends in terms of customers increasingly want to take their security through the cloud. They don't want to have to deploy and embed security specifically within their enterprise. They're looking for ways in which they can leverage the cloud services that are delivered through Cisco and other institutions to get security into their enterprise.
Okay.
Another big trend that we're seeing is around mobility and
Yeah.
BYOD. So that's another big one, certainly, that Cisco's hit really hard. We launched the unified workspace, in which we have a number of smart solutions built around that, which security is deeply embedded into that.
We're also hearing about threat defense. Can you sort of share more about that?
Yeah, so that's a big one.
Yeah.
Definitely we're seeing.
Yeah.
So if you look at some things certainly that are going on in the market today around IPv6
Okay.
and the fact that literally every device is going to have some sort of internet connection. I mean, this is the direction that we're headed to. Smart devices like tablets and smartphones, right? What this has done for enterprises is really expanded their threat landscape now. They're having to look at a much broader perimeter for defense.
Okay.
And so that's opened up opportunities for hackers, for organized crime, even government agencies that now have a much wider area which they can
The
attack.
entire landscape itself.
Yeah.
So with these three trends that you're just sharing with us, what is Cisco's strategy?
That's a good question. So I think John really put it best recently during an earnings call. And that's
Okay.
John's strategy is he wants security in every ASIC, every hardware, and every software product that we build.
Okay.
The reason being is that security is moving quickly into one of those things where it just always needs to be on. It always needs to be there, running for the most part in the background, much like what Cisco did with video and voice. John wants security just to be deeply integrated into everything
Across
that
the
we do.
architectures.
Across the architecture.
Okay.
So when you look at things like data center, collaboration, borderless networks, he wants security weaved in throughout that.
Okay.
So we've got some proof points of that obviously today with our secure routers. We've also got security deeply embedded into our core networking platforms, Catalyst and Nexus, and that's via our TrustSec solution. So the goal here is to have security deeply embedded into everything that we do.
Okay, so how about why Cisco? And why should customers look at Cisco as a security partner?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So first, you know, I should touch on the leadership change. We have made a big investment in security as a
Okay.
company. So we recently brought on Chris Young, our Senior Vice President of Security,
Okay.
Manish Gupta, Vice President of Product Management, Dave Frampton, another Vice President of Product Management, myself running product marketing. And so we've really brought in a new leadership team. We're investing a lot of resources. As a company, you look at our R&D spend at 13% of revenue is higher than HP, Checkpoint, and Juniper combined. So we're putting a lot of money into security. It's a big investment area
So
for
that's
the
part
company.
of the strategy.
This is definitely part of the strategy, and it's part of the why Cisco too, and that
Okay.
we're committed to this business. We see its importance. You go back to the strategy in terms of integrated security. The benefit there, and I think the why Cisco element to that, is the fact that 70% of the world's internet traffic runs through our network.
That's a good
We've
one.
embedded security deeply into that network.
Okay.
And so what that provides us as an ability is, unlike any of the other vendors in the market today, we have an ability to see and observe those threats faster than anyone else. Not just see and observe, but we can triangulate and mitigate against those threats and provide that intelligence out to customers who may be under attack, as well as customers who might not be under attack, but we want to update their policies and provisions anyway, proactively.
So
to make sure
reactive
that they're
and
protected.
proactive.
Yeah, so 1.5 million firewalls deployed out there in the market. I can't even tell you how many millions of switches that we have deployed out there. Sensors built in and integrated into that core fabric gives us the chance to see and observe threats faster than anyone else in the market.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Yeah, I think you've got an exciting show coming up today.
Yes,
So
we
sort
do.
of in the spirit of investment, you know, I think, you know, something that we're going to be focusing on very heavily, going back to that cloud trend as customers move from physical to virtual to cloud, private and public within their data centers, is performance is going to be critical. And this is an area 2 years ago we introduced our new ASA 5585 platform, which is our high-end firewall. And at that point in time, we had an 8x performance advantage over Juniper.
Okay.
Still to this day, we've maintained that performance advantage. So that's a big plus for Cisco. And I think what you'll see through the rest of the show is a continued investment. I think we've got some exciting new things that we're going to show you, and really helps separate us even further from the rest of the competition.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. This was really helpful. Thank you for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you.
Pierre Hagen, welcome to TechWise TV, man.
Thanks very much.
Buddy, is so glad to have you here. But you plan on covering ASA 9.0 in 12 minutes or less?
Absolutely, 120 slides.
What?
Yes, absolutely. No, we're just going
We're
to
gonna-
cover the most important features.
Oh, okay. Well, then let me let you drive. I was going to ask Steve for some more time on the clock, but go ahead, man. Take us there.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm very excited to talk about ASA 9.0 because ASA 9.0 is probably one of the most important new releases that we have.
Yeah.
It brings in a lot of good features
Okay.
that I'm very excited about. So one of the things that I just wanted to touch on is the fact that we can now bring web security in from the cloud to be enforced in the ASA. So we can bring all the value-added information that we have in the ASA with user identification and so forth. We can bring that all the way into the cloud, and then we can bring antiviral inspection and probably use policies and so forth. So we have that with the cloud web security integration that we have worldwide.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on that. It's actually a very exciting feature.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But since this is
Whoa.
looking at a data center in this segment here,
Uh-huh.
this eye chart here is actually talking about how are we actually doing data centers commonly. So really what happens here is that we have the capability of enforcing policy in the data center with ASA firewalls.
Mhm.
So you can see the different
Blocks.
deployments of ASAs and security in a data center. But one of the things that we can do now in ASA 9.0 as well is that we can bring TrustSec into the data center and enforce on it. So basically,
Enforce on it?
Yes, enforce on it. Yes.
Okay, because that's different. We've been able to just kind of monitor it or segment it, but enforce on it, that's a new thing.
Yes. So we actually use the ASA as an enforcement point, so that you can, for example, in the access layer in your network out in the campus, where you arrive in the network at the first entry point, we can actually put a categorization on you. You can put you in a sales group, or we can put you in a particular categorization, and then that information, that tag of categorization, will follow you through your network. And then at the time when you arrive here in the data center, then we can use that information, that categorization, to put you into the right policy group and enforce that policy,
That gun.
as opposed to just using IP addresses and stuff like that changes all the time.
That gives TrustSec some meat then. That gives us some
Yeah,
bite. Because I mean,
absolutely.
it's kind of one of those features like, yeah, it's okay. It's kind of cool, but what can I do with it? Now we actually got some teeth behind it.
Yes,
That's groovy.
actually, yeah. So that's our second phase of our identity firewall, where we previously have been able to
Excellent.
connect up to Active Directory services.
That's smoking.
Yeah. So you will see here in the data center, we typically would put our policy enforcement for the ASAs in the distribution center.
Right.
So we basically have two ASAs here, right? So if we dive a little deeper into the distribution center or layer here, we have basically an ASA and an ASA over here, and they are actually running in active standby mode,
Right.
right? It would be so great if we can run both active at the same time, so
That
we
would be
can
cool.
basically double the capacity,
Heck yeah.
right? Or maybe go even further. So let's do that. 9.0, we actually have the capability of replacing those two devices that previously were in an active standby mode. We can now have them be active, both of them. So basically we create a cluster or stack of all these appliances that run at the same time.
Really?
Yes. And you have seamless policy manipulation on them and enforcement.
Okay.
Yes. And so basically what we're trying to do here is we try to utilize the capabilities that we have on a single device.
Mhm.
So a single device here, we have one of the fastest firewalls in the market.
Yeah, that booger really cooked. Ain't no
Yeah.
doubt about that.
So yeah, you can see over here
Yeah,
we
that's a
can
fast
we can move up to 40 gigabits of firewall throughput and around 10 gigabits of IPS throughput.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, right? But in modern data centers, you'd like to move a little faster, because you want to deploy them in areas where you need a lot of data. So wouldn't it be great if we can do this, where we could basically take our multi-scale performance of a single device and multiply it. So basically put two devices in there and get 80 gigabit of firewall throughput. Or maybe take 4 of them and get 160, or even better, take 8 of them and get around 320 gigabits of throughput.
That'd be totally groovy.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing. We're actually doing something called clustering. And so basically what we're doing here is that we are taking the performance of a single device and we are linearly scaling it across the board,
Mhm.
as opposed to when you have to replicate traffic to all devices in a cluster, then typically you have to you drop off performance after a certain number of
It
devices
gets
in the
logarithmic
cluster.
at some point, right?
Yes, exactly. We don't do that because of the way we have defined our cluster functionality. So we scale linearly, and typically with average traffic, we scale about 70% of the total number of members in a cluster. If they were running standalone, then we do about 70 of the
70%, that's quite a return.
70% of the whole stack. Yes,
Wow.
and still. So obviously, the reason we say 0.7 or 70% is because of traffic profiles that may vary
Right.
from time to time. But the main thing is that we have high availability. So all the units in the cluster are active at the same time. And so, for example, if we have a member that goes out of service or
Mhm.
fails for some reason, the power goes out or anything like that, then the connections through that particular member in the cluster are automatically moved to other members in the cluster.
Really?
Yeah. And the load across the cluster is averaged out.
Oh, it's distributed throughout the whole
Yes.
thing. You don't have one
Yeah,
actually carrying
yeah,
a full
yeah,
load.
yeah.
Okay.
Because before, with an active standby pair, you usually had one device that was active for the whole thing and for the whole member amount of traffic and sessions, and then you had one device that was basically standby, right? So you have a physical chassis to physical chassis redundancy.
Right, you connected with that
Yeah.
cable and you replicated
Yeah.
configs back and forth. We've all been through that
Yeah.
thing.
We don't do that anymore, actually, because we now have session to session high availability.
Huh.
Right, so now everybody
So
in the
use a-
cluster is an active and a standby for one session, and another session they might be a standby and an active.
So you must have a protocol that actually keeps all that
Yes,
stuff. Okay.
actually, yeah. And so basically what we have is we have something called, actually I'll show that later here, but we have a mode where we are communicating across a back plane, so a cluster back plane, we call it the cluster control link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we communicate that information across there.
Okay.
Right. The other thing that is important here is that we can deploy it flexibly. So all
Is
the
this right? All modes are supported?
all modes, yes. So
I didn't expect that.
yeah,
That's
so
that's
transparent,
definitely
routed mode, transparent and routed mode, multi-context mode, and single standalone mode are supported.
cool. Nice. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, and also to make it easier for external devices and for you as a systems admin, we have also done a lot for manageability. So a cluster now looks like a single giant firewall. So you manage a single logical firewall that spans the whole cluster.
That's really nice, especially when they're active. You really need to see it. When it's active standby, it's not as important, but when it's active, I really need to see all these as one unit because that's how they're functioning.
Yeah. But then at the same time, when you have everything as a one unit, yeah, that's one view of it. But if something goes wrong, you also need to track down where is things going wrong. And so we actually also enhanced our troubleshooting tools. So we now do packet captures across the whole cluster as opposed to single units.
Oh, nice.
And we also get logging based on roll-ups.
Very cool.
Yeah. And here's actually a view of what it looks like. So you can see up here that we have an ASA cluster, and we are running it in what we call spanned ether channel mode.
So this is ASDM is what we're looking at right
This
here?
is ASDM.
Okay.
So this is our device manager. So this is typically what you would use to bootstrap the cluster original, and then you'll move on to our enterprise management solution.
Okay.
But you basically have device dashboards up here. So you have firewall dashboards. So those are common from standalone mode. But we've added two more dashboards here, which are cluster dashboards.
Nice.
So, yeah. So for firewall and for the cluster itself. So let's look at the cluster dashboards. You can actually see here, I've set up a cluster consisting of two members. So we have a master, which is the one they manage, and then you have a slave that is basically a slave in a cluster. And you see statistics here. So you see environmental statistics. The critical here is because I've unplugged one of the power supplies in there, so to show you that you get statistics for that.
Alarms, right?
Yeah, and then you also have some interface statistics here say that some of the interfaces are down. So you will actually see when an error comes up, you will actually see that there's something that changes there. And if enough things go wrong or interfaces are down, for example, then a cluster will be told by the master, you need to leave the cluster here until you get to a point where you're healthy enough to rejoin.
totally cool.
Yeah. So you don't lose any connectivity from being for traffic going through a single member that are now being expunged from the cluster. Those connections that previously were in that cluster, they're now being replicated out to or migrated to other members within the cluster.
Nice. Nice, very
Yeah.
cool. Now we've got about a minute left, so
Okay.
I want to make sure we cover any really critical parts here.
Okay, so I just want to show you this one here. So beyond what you just saw with the cluster dashboard, we also have the firewall dashboard. So you can see that you actually have connection statistics for the whole cluster, but you can also get statistics based on the individual firewalls as well in the cluster. So you can see how the load is redistributed out
Nice,
as well.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. You don't lose your identity just because of the
Correct.
cluster. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I think that's what I wanted to show with the dashboard here, and then there's some slides about how you set up here. So actually, this is actually just one quick view of how it's configured here.
That's pretty important stuff because I know we just got just a few seconds left here, but all the engineers out there are wondering, how hard is this to set up? Honestly, man, what are you really looking at to set something like this up?
So there's a couple of steps, right? So you need to set up your switch so that it has a proper infrastructure in place. So you need to set up port channels for connecting the cluster itself.
That's what you're recommending,
for data.
these channels?
Yeah. And then you need to set up a cluster control link, which is a VLAN that all the members are connected to, and which is the backplane of the cluster. And then basically what you do is you follow a wizard in the in ASDM, and it's very easy to set up. Once you have the infrastructure set up, it's actually very easy to set up. You can probably set one of these up in about 15 minutes.
Pierre, thank you so much for coming on TechWise, man. This is really cool stuff.
You're welcome.
Anil Kapoor, welcome to TechWise TV, man.
Thanks, Jimmy Ray.
Hey, good to have you here, man.
It's great to be here.
So, I don't know if you're going to say that in a second here because you're here to talk about IPS
Right.
and some upgrades here to this product. My first question to you is, I've got some hard questions for you, man.
Yeah, throw 'em
kind
at
of
me.
indifferent about IPS. I'll be honest with you. Is this a Moore's Law upgrade? Is that what we're looking at here?
No way, Jimmy Ray. This is not at all a Moore's Law upgrade. It's a new hardware and software architecture. You know, when we talk to data center customers, they're telling us quite a few things. They need multi-gig throughput
Yeah.
so that their data center applications, which run at high speeds, are covered.
Okay.
They need low latency inspection so those business critical applications aren't getting impacted by security, right?
Okay.
They need performance density so they're taking up less rack space,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
And power efficiency, so you don't have to run a river next to your data center to run your IPS.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? That's true because they do eat up a lot because there's a lot of horsepower that goes into doing all that packet inspection stuff for typical IPS out there for sure.
Yeah, and then they need basic redundancy features, for example, multiple power supplies, etc., so that the box is resilient. And the 4510 and the 4520, as you can see here, are actually designed specifically with those requirements in mind. The 4510 and 20 are 2 RU expandable chassis,
Okay.
with the bottom slot occupying an inspection blade.
Uh-huh.
The 4510 is a 3 gig inspection blade, and the 4520 down here is a 5 gig inspection blade.
Okay.
And the top slot is actually unoccupied at the moment,
Uh-huh.
leading to future expansion capabilities.
Ah, I see. I see. Read between the lines type expansion capabilities. Very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
scale is important.
Look, man, I'll tell you, here's the thing. I'll be honest with you. I'm a big fan of Cisco SIO.
Right.
I think that SIO is probably one of the best features and one of the biggest reasons to go with Cisco security. We've got a bunch of brilliant people sitting there that are actively inspecting stuff, and they are up to date by the minute. I mean, these guys are really some sharp. I met these guys, and they're disturbed. I mean, they are so into security, they just make you feel uncomfortable, you know?
Right.
And it's like eating with your in-laws. It's like, man, you know, you guys are friggin' weird. But that being the case, and they update firewalls like crazy. They got that feed in there. Is there really a need for this anymore? I mean, let's be serious, man. I mean, when you got that kind of horsepower behind you doing that research, and and our firewalls are our protection, right? Our firewalls
Right.
are true, that barrier that protects us, you know, from those security threats.
Why do we need the IPS?
Is there even a need anymore? I mean, come on, man. Is this like 80s again or what?
So I think we're getting a little confused, right?
Okay.
If we look at an IPS, it's a solution that includes both the sensor and SIO. So let me take it step by step.
Okay.
Let's talk about the sensor first. So we have a litany of deployment options when it comes to the sensor. You can either buy a standalone sensor, or you can buy a blade that slides into a 5585X or 5500X. The standalone series, we actually have a 4300, which is for the internet edge. And then the new 4500 series is meant for very large WAN aggregation points, as well as the data center.
Okay.
So those sensors are deployed really at the internet edge, the WAN edge, the data center, and the campus throughout a customer's network, right?
Okay.
So once we have those detection and enforcement points, right, to detect threats on the network in a way that a firewall can't, because we're doing deep packet inspection with our IPS.
Right, true.
Right? To see the actual threats at a much higher layer, right? Then you also need to keep those sensors up to date. And that's where SIO comes in. SIO are, as you stated, the people, the data, the algorithms that provide the data to our IPS so it keeps it up to date on the latest threat trends, right, and the threat landscape. So what that really means, right, is that our IPS is getting signature updates twice a week and reputation feeds every 15 minutes, right, from SIO.
Right.
So you putting it all together, an IPS backed by SIO provides threat identification and mitigation if you put in IPS mode, right?
Right.
To meet regulatory compliance, whether it be HIPAA, NERC-FERC, PCI, GLBA, SOX, or in the latest trends around SCADA protections for industrial controls.
Yeah, that's obviously, a lot of people are looking at SCADA now with Stuxnet and all that other stuff that's came out and hit some, our industrial sides pretty hard as well. So that's interesting. So let me switch to the board, because this wouldn't be TechWise TV. I wasn't drawing something, man. I mean, I'm paid by quota by how many squares I can draw. So here we go. Here's $5. So what we're really looking at basically in a network design today is that if you have your IPS here, and this is your firewall here, the IPS is still really acting almost like the old school Bastion host did, where it's kind of filtering down and we're offloading our processes before they hit here. We're doing all our deeper, bigger stuff here. And you're saying that that's really still a bigger need now than what it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely. With the threat landscape actually increasing, it becomes more and more, and APTs and other threats available. It's important that we have even more data points in order to more effectively understand what the threats are online out there. And the great thing about the Cisco IPS solution is that we have those multiple form factors.
Yeah.
So if you want to run your standalone off a span port, you can do that. If you want to run it inline, you can do that as well.
Okay.
Or if you want to slide into a firewall and run it inline there, you have a deployment modality for that as well. Right.
I have always liked that about pretty much every Cisco product across the board, is the ability that there's no cookie cutter. Right? We've got a bunch of different ways for you to tie that in. That's a humongous Cisco advantage, is that whatever network you have, bring it on out, we'll have some type of form factor. We don't try to squeeze you in this big box just because that's all we got.
That's right.
We'll size you out accordingly. You mentioned an interesting point here about having this in front of the network and screen that stuff out. One of the bigger trends, or one of the things that people are wanting to ask, my engineers out in the field are asking me all the time, context. I need something for context security. Where are we at with context security on this type of stuff?
That's a great question. So we actually call our software code base, which spans, the same software code base actually spans the standalone and the integrated series.
Okay.
We call that software code base context-aware IPS, right? And really what it's all about is what I call mean time to conviction, right? So if you look at the threat landscape and the complexity of networks nowadays, it's harder to figure out where the real threats are in your network.
Our attack surface is bigger now than I've ever seen it, man. I mean, it's huge. It's huge.
So when we talk to our customers, they're doing a bunch of really just common sense things with their IPSs in their management tools. They're taking a look at who the attacker IP address is to see if it's coming from a known set of IP subnets that are known bad, or from a suspicious geography. They may also be doing things like looking at the victim to see if it's a critical asset, which you should be really concerned about, or if the operating system is at all relevant to the attack that just occurred. Why do I care about a signature that fired on Linux against a Linux host if it's the attack happened against a Windows host?
Exactly.
Why waste my time, right?
Exactly.
So we took those common sense principles, and in addition to having them in the management plane, right, like many IPS vendors do, we took those data points and we put them right into the sensor so that we can do detection and mitigation decisions, not post-processing, but in line at microsecond level timing, right? So that that level of decision making is kind of uncompared in the industry, and it provides what we call context aware, right? A bunch of common sense principles applied right into the sensor at the point where it matters most.
Well, and that's the thing that really gets pretty scary when you're looking at a bunch of attacks today, because if you, once again, time to make my paycheck here, is that if I'm looking at a typical threat here, and I'll do my rudimentary skull and crossbones, if I look at my threat coming in, it used to be so simple, man, right? I mean, my threat would come in on, old school, right? It'd come in port 31337, and be like, oh man, we already know what that threat is. But now, the one thing we know when it comes to context is a lot of our threats are coming in on common name ports, and they're just nested underneath that, and that's where the real context security comes in. And you're telling me that I'm able to dissect this stuff in millisecond format? That's pretty darn impressive.
So that's not actually what I'm telling you.
Oh, then I'm glad I tried to clarify it then.
Yes,
what are you trying to tell me there?
So what I am trying to tell you is that, so when it comes to port 80, we have
Yeah.
great solutions with CX, and we can dissect applications with CX at that point in the network, right?
Okay.
When it comes to other parts of the network as well, and other ports,
Right.
Including port 80, the IPS is very important there, right? And what it's doing is it's pulling together data points that we use for a network forensics case, right? In order to identify real threats as opposed to just noise.
Okay.
And putting all that data right into the IPS and making that decision capability in the IPS. What that does is one of two things. If you're running an IPS mode, it lends itself to greater accuracy, right? If you're running an IDS mode, it's really reducing all that noise to what are real threats on your network, things that you should be looking at, not wasting your time chasing.
That is true. It reduces those false positives, which is obviously always the Achilles heel of any IPS, right, is all the false positives and the ability to do that. Wow, it does a lot more than I thought. I mean, I was trying to be some goober friggin' marketing, hey, that really is pretty groovy. I mean, that's stuff that we can actually use right now, and this is available right now in this product?
That's absolutely right. We just launched the 4500 series, and the 4300 series just came out a few months ago.
Anil, this is totally groovy, man. I'm so grateful that you came on TechWise. I was really going to beat you up here because I was really kind of questioning the IPS and our commitment to IPS, to be honest with you. But it looks like we're still A-game players here, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Jeff, welcome to TechWise TV.
Hey, thanks a lot.
So a couple of questions. I want to talk about this notion of multiple form factors, because we were prepping a lot as we covered some of the information, and we've seen this throughout other segments on the show today, which is there are definitely some hardware announcements that are worth talking about. And I don't want to say they fill in holes, because I've actually never felt like we had a lot of holes or any kind of significant holes, if you will, but where it speeds unrivaled in the industry. We are in the data center in a big way. But that's not the whole story. So before we talk about just form factors, hope you don't mind, help me understand from your perspective about kind of the more foundational elements of the vision here and how that ties into what we're trying to achieve.
Sure. Well, something you heard Scott Gainey talk about a little bit earlier, and really something that we're really trying to articulate as much as possible is that Cisco's security vision is really to provide really an always-on integrated security for all of our customers so that they can be free to really enable their networks and develop their networks in the way that best suits their business needs.
This is funny. So the more security we do, the better we're getting at not doing security, if you will. I mean, because it's not doing security, but the idea is that really good security in a perfect world is not something we touch or feel, right? We're not, hopefully we don't want to be aware of it, because that's the one they always hate.
Right. Yeah. So just kind of make sure that it's understood. It's not really that security is not security. It's really much more what I'm really trying to say.
To the nth degree.
Right. It's really trying to say that the best security is security that you don't have to think about all the time.
Right.
And that's really been the biggest problem that our customers have felt over the last few years. The thing is, physical, virtual, cloud, mobility, collaboration, all these things are implementation decisions.
Right.
And that's a really good thing, because if I'm a network administrator at a customer site, I should really be able to develop my network in the way that best fits my specific business needs. I shouldn't have to say, oh, wait a second, I've got to do this way, I've got to do that way. I should just be able to do it.
Well, that's what you historically see people doing, right? Which is we get very focused on the business things that we're answering in terms of, let's say, collaboration. We're working on productivity improvements, and every box is checked, and everybody's really excited. And then they get to that part of it where they go, okay, we're supposed to do something about security.
Right.
And then they kind of throw it in at the last second, and security is significant enough that it disrupts kind of what they thought they were going to do, because now they have to reforce it around security. You're saying we should not have to do that.
Right, because what essentially happens in a lot of cases is that security is an afterthought, so it becomes a bolt-on.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if I'm bolting it onto a physical environment and then I decide, hey, you know, I really want to take some of this stuff virtual, what happens? Well, now I have to bolt on a virtual solution as well.
Yeah.
So it becomes...
You're just increasing complexity, which is the enemy of security.
It becomes really hard.
Yeah.
It becomes really, really hard. And all of a sudden I have to have all these new staffers just to deal with the complexity of the security rather than just having a secure environment.
Okay.
So Cisco is really different because, you know, again, kind of going back to what Scott said earlier, we are the network. I mean, 70% of the world's internet traffic runs through Cisco networks. So we're really in the best position to see threats as they come through, before they come through in a lot of cases, and be able to deal with that. And we've actually been able to build security throughout the very fabric of the network. So as a result, we've actually been able to build security. Now that's when we kind of get into some of the form factor pieces of this thing, is because we've actually been able to implement security in such a way where it just simply becomes another deployment decision, just like their network decisions are.
Well, by being part of the network, you're saying we almost have to do this. It's not it's like, well, how could you not? Right.
Right. It's certainly, the onus is on us to do it. But you know, the more important piece there is that we're the only ones who really have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
Nobody else has a network footprint that we have. So nobody else really has the capability to do what we can do.
Yeah. Well, so tell me about this. When we talk about ASA and we talk about all the different places that it is in now, so this is obviously deployment across Blade. We've got virtual versions as well as the appliance. This always blows my mind, this notion of, and then I just did a little stripe there, but single code base across all these deployments. Really?
Yeah, really. So we start with the same base ASA code, and then we've tweaked it in order to fit in these other environments. You know, let's start with the appliances. So the appliances, let's face it, and that's been the mainstay of our business for a lot of years.
A lot of history.
The nice thing is, the appliance is going nowhere.
Right.
You're always going to need a physical
just in the
appliance
last
somewhere.
year, we've announced so many more high-speed appliances and such like this, so we can operate anywhere in the network.
But the market isn't staying on just appliances.
Right.
We have to enable our customers to do things in new and unique ways and really grow to that next level. In order to do that, we need to provide different form factors so they can really do that very easily. So the very first thing we did is we developed a Blade, a Blade version of that appliance. So what we did is we took our highest performing Blade, the ASA5585X, which is a 40 gig firewall. And we put it into a Blade form factor that just slides right into an empty slot in your Catalyst 6500 series chassis. You can actually put up to 4 ASA blades into that single chassis.
That's a lot of throughput.
So at the end, you can actually have a 64 gig firewall without taking a single rack unit, not one. And power and cooling, it's all part of the switch. So no, specific cabling that needs to be done. No, because all the contacts are virtual. You don't have to have your own power and cooling. Not a single unit of rack space. Yet you just simply add security right into that.
So the appliance in certain situations, we have the Blade here as well. Virtual. Why?
Virtual. So the ASA 1000V that's one of the new things that we're announcing today. And the ASA 1000V, most of our competition has what we call a virtual firewall, and that's literally I've taken my firewall code and wrapped it in a VM wrapper. Well,
it's kind of cheating.
It's kind of cheating, and not only that,
out,
but what it really does, in some ways, it makes it easier. I'll give them their dues, but the bigger problem there is that you lose all your flexibility. I mean, once you stick it into a VM and install not bare metal, you're done. And if you need to move it across ESX hosts, you can't. You're going to have to spin up a new instance for every ESX host.
So everything you got into virtualization for, which is about the mobility and about the flexibility and the workload moves, well, security isn't going to break all that.
And that's the biggest crime, right? Why did I get into virtualization? Well, there's a lot of reasons, ROI reasons, all that, but the biggest reason is flexibility. And you lose any and all flexibility with your firewall if you do a virtual firewall. So kind of sounds like a lot of marketing spin, but we're not a virtual firewall. We're a firewall that's been specifically built for virtual and cloud environments. And what we really mean there is we took that base ASA code and optimized it to work in and for virtual and cloud environments. So it is a real ASA. And essentially, it's the data center use cases that are enabled on that thing, But the nice thing is that you can span multiple ESX hosts.
Right.
You can span multiple virtual data centers. It supports vMotion, so when you have to move it across data
You're
centers,
not breaking all that mobility.
you're not. More importantly, you're not breaking all your security code.
Yeah.
So all of your security policies move with you.
Which also means you're speaking a language in terms of, we've got people, gazillion engineers that are comfortable working in that
Yeah.
appliance or even that blade form factor. They know what the CLI looks like. They know what the management
Right.
interface. They know how to answer the questions. They know how to build their policies. They're not going to be scared of some implementation like that form
Right.
factor.
In fact, they
Same.
don't even have to really consider it.
Yeah, it really doesn't affect them, does it?
Up here, I'm going to write my security policy up here, and whether it's being initiated on a blade, an appliance, or on the virtual form factor,
Okay.
irrelevant. That's an implementation decision.
All right. So can we jump to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, a lot of boxes here, and probably the point is not to say, ooh, look at all our boxes,
Right.
because this has not been a hardware-specific discussion, but there's a couple of new things here worth pointing out, yes?
Right. So what I wanted to show here, and yeah, that was my only issue with this slide. Is it seems very hardware heavy.
Yeah.
But really, the point I wanted to make in here is everything from branch locations to the internet edge to data centers, we have a solution to cover you. So from the appliance side, historically, we have had the most scalable solution in the industry for years, and we still do. And all this hardware is actually brand new. But the bigger story here, this is the blade form factor I talked about,
Yeah.
which is essentially the same thing as this 40 gig firewall right here. So that's our ASA 5585X, which is really for the data center. So is the ASA services module. The only real difference is one is in a 2RU chassis, the other one is in a blade form factor and fits right into that Catalyst 6500 series.
Okay.
Now, this right here,
Virtual.
unfortunately, I can only show a box shot.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem with the virtual side, right? It's just not
Exactly.
as sexy.
Right.
But it works so well. Yeah.
But the ASA 1000V is, again, for the data center. These three are really equivalent to one another. So if you're thinking back to that last slide where we had 3 bubbles, there's your 3 bubbles right there.
Any form factor, wherever you need to put it as well.
Wherever you
Okay.
need it in order to solve your business needs.
Now, IPS, similar kind of thing here is our last point.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got some of the ASAs in here as well with IPS functionality, yes?
Yeah, so, actually, these are, so it depends on how you look at it. So, essentially, we have standalone and integrated. So, integrated with the firewall, essentially, you'll see that these and these look exactly the same. They use the same hardware chassis. In here, the IPS is actually integrated via software. There's a software IPS that's integrated with the firewall.
Okay.
So you just turn on that IPS.
So where the processing is happening is going to make a difference in terms of that deployment. Because obviously software is going to be a little bit different hit on the processor.
Yeah. So this is a multiprocessor environment.
Okay.
So it actually doesn't take you out of your
Oh, it's not a
productivity at all.
negative. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, not at all. It just depends on your deployment scenario. What are the business needs that you're trying to solve?
Okay.
So in a lot of cases, I want my firewall and IPS together. It's just easier.
Okay.
I want one physical box. I want one rack unit or 2 rack units in this case. Let me just be done with it. In other cases, we see this a lot in a lot of support types of groups where they want their IPS to be standalone. A firewall also, by its very nature, is kind of like shooting a beacon up in the sky and saying, hey, here I am. A lot of scenarios, I don't want that. I don't want people to know that I'm protecting this area with an IPS.
Right.
So we have the standalone for that. This is all our mid-market.
Drives a different set of behavior.
Yeah. And then in the data center, we have essentially the same type of thing. So everything from the mid-market all the way to the data center, we have standalone IPS as well as IPS integrated within the firewall.
So really, the IPS is really keeping up with the ASA in terms of the various deployment scenarios
Absolutely.
and such, wherever it could go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So software,
Interesting.
hardware, you name it, we've got it.
Go ahead.
Oh, and then something that I don't have a slide for, but I think you're going to hear Swastik Bahani talk in just a few minutes about our web security. So we've had our WSA, our web security appliance, for many years. Well, now in ASA 9, I think Per Hagen mentioned it earlier today, ASA 9 has a connector to what we call Cisco Cloud Web Security.
Yeah.
And Cisco Cloud Web Security is essentially a cloud version of our historic hardware-based WSA. So you can actually now peel off a portion of that traffic and have that deep traffic inspection for web security without taking any sort of performance
Okay, leave
hit.
that as a tease. Don't give it all away.
Absolutely.
We don't steal that other segment.
I will not take that from
Is
them.
there anything else that doesn't involve theft of another segment that you'd like to cover before we go?
Really, the one thing I want to leave you with is that when it comes to security, I mentioned our strategy earlier. Essentially, because we are the network, we're using the network to drive our security. But more importantly, we're also using security to drive a lot of network. So the network is becoming inherently better because of security and vice versa.
Look at you with the closing
telling
branded
you.
shout out
I'm
type
telling
thing.
you.
Very good. Jeff, thank you so
Almost
much
like a
for your
marketing guy.
time.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. All right.
Just like a marketing guy. Take care.
You too.
Swastik, welcome to TechWise TV.
Thank you.
Question. You're with Cisco, what is now called, I got to get this right, Cisco Cloud Web Security.
That's correct.
Okay, good. What is it that you guys do?
So Cisco,
explain it?
simply put, it's a proxy in the cloud,
Okay.
right? And let me explain a little
That's
bit more.
almost too simple.
Right, that's too simple, right?
Okay.
So the way you look at it is all organizations today cannot do away with their employees using the web or email. Like, it's pretty basic.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like utility now.
Yeah, it's exactly like utility. But it also becomes now a big vector for the bad guys.
Some of the worst.
Right?
Right.
To send malware. Or also from a company's perspective, if you look at it, it also is a place where they want to make sure they have control around productivity. Like, hey, does my employee need to go to Facebook or does he not need to go on Facebook?
Well, and it's a granular thing. Or if I'm on Facebook, then how much am I on it, or what am I doing specifically within
Correct.
that? Because these are platform applications, some of them.
That is correct.
So you're talking about some pretty wide vectors, and let's be straight up. Even though the names kind of continue to change, this isn't something we're new at. We've been doing web security on a professional basis for customers for years, right?
Yes.
I mean, this isn't something we just got into.
That is correct. We've been around for more than 7 years in web security. So, like you said, this is something not new for us. We have multiple form factors that we can get web security for
What
customers.
are those?
So that's an on-premises, if you
Okay.
will. That's a web security appliance. You
Okay.
have the cloud web security, which was previously called ScanSafe. It was an acquisition that Cisco did.
Okay. Yep.
And then, of course, as we are executing on the further attach into our integration into Cisco strategy, we are having something called the cloud connected. So this is where you have the cloud-based web security being available more easily with different devices within the Cisco network to allow anywhere, anytime kind of web security available for customers.
Well, let's talk more about how we're making that easier on the cloud connected side. But just to make sure I understand it, so when we're talking about cloud versus a physical presence, being that people are, and most of our customers are operating in both main locations versus branch versus mobile employees, this is also done in a hybrid fashion too as well, correct? So there's a mix of the two?
So absolutely, customers can choose where they want to do on-premise or where they want to do cloud. But like you were saying, right, it's just looking from a cloud web security perspective, what we're doing is making it easy for customers to consume that web security. The two key things that customers want from a cloud-based web security is A, how do you get the traffic into the cloud, right? Because you want to write policies at one single place, and regardless of wherever the end user is within the customer's base, you want that same policies
Well,
to
it
be
feels
applied.
like anytime you start wanting to use something like that, is that you're going to delay, you're going to slow down my response time, you're going to redirect traffic so that you can cleanse it, and that all sounds good, but everybody wants security up into the point until security starts rearing itself. If it becomes visible security, I don't want anything to do with it.
Right.
So we are doing things, and I think Cloud Connector plays into this in terms of keeping this somewhat of a transparent type delivery?
That is absolutely right. The transparent is what is very key for us, and that's where the other part, which is getting the identity in, that's where integrating with all these Cisco properties helps us, like with the ASA 9.0, the firewall, the ISR G2 branch router, AnyConnect secure mobility, which gets you all that roaming functionality. But absolutely, the key thing for us is to how do you get that traffic very transparently and easily to the cloud. And the second point that you made, which is, yes, security is great until it becomes visible.
Yeah.
I think especially in a cloud environment that is more true and web, because the latency is super important. And that's where Cisco has invested tremendously with its 21 data centers across the world for making sure that whether you are
That's
here
no
in
simple investment we're talking about there. So we're talking about geographically dispersed, because you mentioned they're global.
Correct.
So these are data centers, and this is part of that SIO integration, and part of, so traffic getting cleansed and filtered and such. This is happening in some part through those 21 data centers based on the location and the device being used at that point in time?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the idea is, like, say if you're in San Jose today, right, you're at the headquarters, you have cloud web security going through a local data center in San Jose. But say tomorrow you're going to Tokyo for a business trip, you go into a Starbucks, you open your laptop, you will be able to get that same security, but through the local instance of our cloud, which is in Tokyo.
We almost have as many data centers as we have Starbucks. That would be big. That'd be a lot of data centers. That makes sense. So the idea is we're not signing up for a specific tier of service. It is the top level service for everybody, and we're going to take you to that location. You don't have to be aware of it. That's all delivered transparently.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the goal.
So you guys have made some other announcements as well, but I want to, before I get to that, because I want to talk a little bit more about the mobile, but I want to make sure it's clear. So we've been talking about ASA 9.0 and the technology formerly known as ScanSafe that we're now making a lot easier with the cloud connectors. This is part of that ASA 9.0 announcement, is it not correct?
Absolutely.
So this is something a lot easier for people to take advantage of?
Absolutely.
What do they got to do?
So all they have to do is have a ScanSafe Cloud Center account and then put in the key into the ASA and redirect traffic into the data center.
So literally you can make that decision today, because we're talking about something that's delivered as a service for the most part. Obviously there's on-prem delivery, but in terms of redirecting traffic and starting to take advantage of all that intelligence that's being offered in that cloud delivered service, it could be had like that.
That's exactly what it is.
It seems pretty simple that we should be taking advantage of that.
Yep.
So tell me about mobile security. You guys are doing something different with mobile devices now. What is that?
So this is in regards to our email security business. So we have introduced something called business class email on our mobile devices.
What is that?
So business class email is an ability to encrypt email as it passes your gateway. So what we have is a very easy way where, say, you can put in a tag which says confidential, and automatically the gateway will know I have to encrypt it.
So in other words, it triggered automatically based on the fact that the word confidential was used somewhere in there?
Absolutely.
So now we're talking about transparent delivery again. In other words, the employee doesn't even have to think about it.
Exactly. And now we're making it what the announcement is about is we're making it more and more easy for our customers to do that same kind of functionality that they enjoyed on desktops now with mobile phones, whether it's an Android, whether it's a BlackBerry, whether it's an Apple
encryption
device.
makes a lot of sense to me from a desktop perspective, because I always think of that as being somewhat processor intensive. I always think about encryption and decryption and key management. You know, frankly, the more I know about encryption, sometimes the less I'm inclined to want to use it because of the inherent or perceived complexity. But what you're saying is that from an employee perspective, we've not only figured out how to do this lightly on a device, but that the employee doesn't even have to be aware of when to invoke it or when not to. We can set certain policy-based triggers.
Yes.
They're going to take care of that for us.
Correct. So you can do policy-based triggers, or you can, as an employee, he can open his handheld, say, I want to encrypt this message very explicitly, and also can do that same thing.
And and it's not a heavy load on the device, and we're not going to, we talked about latency and such on the web-delivered services before. Obviously, that's a process latency could also be an issue potentially. But tell me, just for anybody that may not be that familiar with it or not deeply versed in security, explain to me why encryption is necessary for email.
That's a great question. So the way I look at it is, plain email, as we all know it, is no different than sending a postcard, right? It's open.
Oh, like in other words, because I always hated postcards because everything is open.
It's open. You don't know whether, hey, I sent it to you. Did you receive it? Or if I send it by mistake to the wrong Rob, who is probably in my financial group, and since it's autocomplete on my Outlook with you, I send you the wrong financial data.
Well, that never happens more than once a day.
Right. And when you do recall with Exchange, what happens? The first thing people do is like, oh, what is he trying to recall? Let me just go read it.
That makes me read a message, because there's so many that I don't read. If someone's trying to recall it, I go out of my way to go dig that thing back up and say, it must have been something good. Usually it's not.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be anyway.
Right, so that's the problem business class email tries to solve, which is...
So it's more than just encryption. You're talking about control over email really here.
Yes.
Encryption is obviously that's really icing on the cake, I think. But for a lot of people, I think the notion of not being so or feeling so out of control with emails, because you can pull that back. Basically, what you're doing is you're saying you're yanking the key, right? So in other words, if something has not been decrypted, that key suddenly gets revoked for whatever reason. That's that last bit of control we still have over it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And read receipt also works. So because it's the same concept, when the end recipient gets the encrypted message, to decrypt it, they need to download the key. Yeah. And when they do that, that's a trigger for us. It's like, hey, this person read the message.
Ah, so you have that confirmation.
So you've got read receipt, you've got the ability to recall a message, and above all, it's going encrypted, so nobody can just
more of my email, I think. Yeah. So email's now gone business class. We don't have no more coach for email. I like that. Anything else we need to cover that on the announcements? You guys have been hard at work.
No, this is good. I mean, this is the main stuff, which is the ASA 9.0 with the cloud connector stuff, as well as the business class email. Those are key things for us.
Very good. Well, Swastik, thank you so much for joining us on TechWise.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay, I'm being told that we need to end the show. But first, I want to thank you for watching. It's been a good one. I love talking about security. Now in the data center, no less. Physical, virtual, throughout the cloud, we got it all covered. High-performance devices. If you didn't get enough, as always, check out the rest of the videos. TechWiseTV.com is your source for everything. The show notes and links to more information can be found on the blog. My name is Rob Boyd. I appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you next time. I've got a rumble in my tumbler.
Grandma in disguise.
Okay.
Take cookies, you little